will of the people elected a House that understands we are a separate and co-equal branch of government. The will of the people elected a House that understands we have a constitutional responsibility to serve as a check and balance on an out-of-control executive branch. The president abused his power and must be held accountable. No one is above the law. America must remain the last best hope on earth. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Gaetz.
The will of the American people also elected Donald Trump to be the president of the United States in the 2016 election, and there's one party that can't seem to get over it. Now, we understand the fact that in 2018 you took the House of Representatives, and we haven't spent our time during your tenure in power trying to remove the Speaker of the House, trying to delegitimize your ability to govern. Frankly, we'd love to govern with you. We'd love to pass USMCA. We'd love to put out a helping hand to our seniors and lower prescription drug prices. It's the will of the people you ignore when you continue down this terrible road of impeachment. Professor Gerhardt, you gave money to Barack Obama, right?
If we fall for...
So when I tell you that Donald Trump is not the guy who's going to look out for you, you need to listen. Do not be bamboozled.
Okie doke.
My family did, yes.
4 times?
That sounds about right. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I have a series of unanimous consent requests relating to Professor Feldman's work. The first, Noah Feldman, Trump's wiretap tweets raise risk of impeachment.
Has the gentleman submitted? Have we seen those, that material?
We can provide it to you, as is typical for unanimous.
And we'll consider the unanimous consent request later after we review
Very well.
the material.
Very well. Thank you.
The gentleman may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Feldman wrote articles entitled, "Trump's Wiretap Tweets Raise Risk of Impeachment."
This is dead serious, folks. Feldman of Harvard Law. The sitting president has accused his predecessor of an act that could have gotten the past president impeached. How is such misconduct by an official to be addressed? The answer is that the constitutional remedy for presidential misconduct is impeachment. If the alleged action would be impeachable if true, so must be the allegation if false. This is an incredibly delicate essay.
He then wrote, Mar-a-Lago ad belongs in impeachment file. And then Mr. Jake Flanagan wrote in Quartz, a Harvard law professor thinks Trump could be impeached over fake news accusations. My question, Professor Feldman, is since you seem to believe that the basis for impeachment is even broader than the basis that my Democrat colleagues have laid forward, do you believe you're outside of the political mainstream on the question of impeachment?
I believe that impeachment is warranted whenever the president abuses his power for personal benefit or to corrupt the democratic process.
Did you write an article entitled "It's Hard to Take Impeachment Seriously Now"?
Yes, I did write that article.
And in that article, did you write, hold on, I'm limited on time, sir.
I wrote
did you
that
write,
article.
since the 2018 midterm election, House Democrats have made it painfully clear that discussing impeachment is primarily or even exclusively a tool to weaken President Trump's chances in 2020. Did you write those words?
Until this call on July 25th, I was an impeachment skeptic. The
Very
call
well.
changed my mind, sir, and for
Thank
good
you.
reason.
I appreciate your testimony. Professor Carlin, you gave $2,000, or you gave $1,000 to Elizabeth Warren, right?
I believe so.
You gave $1,200 bucks to Barack Obama?
I have no reason to question that.
And you gave $2,000 to Hillary Clinton?
That's us. That's correct.
Why so much more for Hillary than the other two?
What difference at this point does it make?
Because I've been giving a lot of money to charity recently because of all of the poor people in the United States.
Well, those aren't the only folks you've been given to. Now, have you ever been on a podcast called Versus Trump?
I think I was on a live panel that the people who ran the podcast called Versus Trump.
On that, do you remember saying the following? Liberals tend to cluster more. Conservatives, especially very conservative people, tend to spread out more. Perhaps because they don't even want to be around themselves. Did you say that?
Yes, I did.
Do you understand how that reflects contempt on people who are conservative?
No, what I was talking about there was the natural tendency, if you put the quote in context, the natural tendency of a compactness requirement to favor a party whose voters are more spread out.
Well,
and I do not have contempt
hold on. I'm very limited on time, Professor. And so I just have to say, when you talk about how liberals want to be around each other and cluster, and conservatives don't want to be around each other, and so they have to spread out, it makes people, you may not see this from, like the ivory towers of your law school, but it makes actual people in this country feel like, excuse me, you don't get to interrupt me on this time. Now, let me also suggest that when you invoke the president's son's name here.
And contrary to what President Trump has said, Article 2 does not give him the power to do anything he wants. And I'll just give you one example that shows you the difference between him and a king, which is the Constitution says there can be no titles of nobility. So while the president can name his son Baron, he can't make him a baron.
When you try to make a little joke out of referencing Baron Trump, that does not lend credibility to your argument. It makes you look mean. It makes you look like you're attacking someone's family, the minor child of the President of the United States. So let's see if we can get into the facts. To all of the witnesses, if you have personal knowledge of a single material fact in the Schiff report, please raise your hand. And let the record reflect no personal knowledge of a single fact. And you know what? That continues on the tradition that we saw from Adam Schiff, where Ambassador Taylor could not identify an impeachable offense. Mr. Kent never met with the president. Fiona Hill never heard the president reference anything regarding military aid. Mr. Hale was unaware of any nefarious activity with aid. Colonel Vindman even rejected the new Democrat talking point that bribery was invoked here. Ambassador Volker denied that there was a quid pro quo, and Mr. Morrison said there was nothing wrong on the call. The only direct evidence came from Gordon Sondland, who spoke to the President of the United States, and the President said, "I want nothing, no quid pro quo." And you know what? If wiretapping a political opponent's an impeachable offense, I look forward to reading that Inspector General's report, because maybe it's a different president we should be impeaching.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Well, I think it was a tough day for Democrats in the House Judiciary Committee. They thought that bringing us into the faculty lounge of America's law schools would somehow motivate Americans to support an impeachment that they haven't, to large part. Over the last 3 weeks, Democrats have seen public opinion for their impeachment effort diminish, not enhance. And I don't think that you saw anything today that's going to help them in that regard. These were not dispassionate people, invited by the Democrats at least, analyzing the law and the facts. They're advocates. As I pointed out, the Democrat witnesses, a majority of them are donors to Democratic campaigns. They have written extensively about impeachment. You even had the gentleman from Harvard writing articles that the president should be impeached for criticizing CNN, for pardoning Sheriff Joe Arpaio, and for several of his tweets about wiretapping. And so it seems as though there would have been no impeachment theory that they wouldn't have supported.
Let's play this from the Harvard law professor Noah Feldman on the abuse of power, which was really the thrust of their argument today. Watch this.
High crimes and misdemeanors are abuses of power and of public trust connected to the office of the presidency. On the basis of the testimony and the evidence before the House, President Trump has committed impeachable high crimes and misdemeanors by corruptly abusing the office of the presidency.
All right. So looking at it from the Democrat perspective for a moment here, they look at your line of questioning and say, yeah, so why didn't you defend the president on this issue of abuse of power? You spent most of your time going after them as partisans and trying to undermine their argument that way. But you didn't try to dismantle their argument that the president abused his power. Why not?
Because I only had 5 minutes, Martha, but I think that there is a lot of evidence to support the president's reasonable and well-founded suspicion that there was corruption in the Ukraine. I think the best evidence probably came from George Kent, who said that Burisma was so corrupt that our embassy had to pull out of a public-private partnership to avoid any association with them. In fact, the Obama administration was so concerned about Hunter Biden's association with Burisma that when they were prepping ambassadors for Senate confirmation, they had to spend spend special time on this issue. And I would suggest that Professor Feldman's argument would be more credible if he wasn't so willing to reflexively support impeachment in every case of legitimate exercise of presidential power.
Well, I just thought it was interesting, and I was sitting there watching most of the coverage today, and I saw very little in terms of an effort on the part of Republicans to try to dismantle their arguments on substance. So,
well, I mean, I made substantive arguments. I referenced in my 5 minutes the testimony of Taylor, of Hale, of Vindman, of Hill, and I pointed out where a lot of the undergirding of the argument that there had been an abuse was not based on firsthand knowledge. It was based on people's perception and belief about what was going on around them, not what they had witnessed and observed.
All right. And the schedule, from what we're hearing from Eric Swalwell, we're never going to hear from anybody who was any closer to it than we have so far. So, Matt Gaetz, Congressman, thank you. Always good to have you here. Thanks for being here tonight.
I am your voice.